So again, some review. Slope can also be used to describe a rate of change. Slope describes how slanted or how steep a line is. A line is, or how slanted it is. The greater the absolute value of the slope, the steeper the line. Okay? So the bigger the number the slope is, the steeper the line will be. You read slope from left to right on a graph. We do that a lot in math. We always go from left to right for the most part. There's some instances where we don't. Most of the time we go from left to right, just like you would read a sentence or your book. So in this first example, example 1, from left to right, the line is going upwards. Okay, so we start on the left, we go to the right, it's pointing upwards. So we would say that the slope will be positive. Very good. From example 2, from left to right, the slope is going downward. So we're going to say that the slope will be negative. Example 3 is a horizontal line. Going horizontal from left to right. It is like walking across the floor. So the slope's going to be what? 0. Yeah, you're just walking across the flat surface, across the floor. I'm not going upwards, I'm not going downwards, I'm nice and flat. So the slope is 0. In example 4, for example 4 says this is a vertical line. It's like walking onto a wall. And I walk on the wall unless I'm like in the Matrix or something or Spider-Man. No. So Tyler, what's our slope? It's undefined. There you go. It is undefined. Okay. It's a great way to remember it. When it's horizontal, it's like walking on the floor. You can walk on the floor, slope 0. But when it's up and down, it's like walking on a wall. Okay. Questions over that? A vertical line fails the vertical line test for a function. So it is a line, but not a function. Okay? Remember, for functions, there's exactly 1 y assigned to each x. You can't have x values repeated, so each x has 1 y. If x has more than 1 y, then it will be repeated. Okay? X Here's the slope formula. And slope is just rise over run, which is the change in y over the change in x. We find that by doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay? Our part is we get our points flip-flop. It doesn't really matter which one you make your x1 and which one you make your y1 and your x2 and your y2. You just have to be consistent. Okay? Just have to be consistent. So we're going to find the slope of the line through the following pairs of points. Okay? I just go in order for my x1, my y1, and my x2 and my y2. Doesn't matter which one you make yours, you just have to be consistent. So I'm just going to go in order. And we know x comes first in a point, y is second. X is first, y is second. And then we just plug it into that formula. y2 minus y1. So what is our top going to look like? 2 minus 3. Minus 3. y2 minus y1. 2 minus 3. Okay. What is our bottom going to look like? X2 minus 6. Which is what? 4 minus 2. Clean it up some more. 2 minus 3 is what? Negative 1. And 4 minus 2 is? 2. Can 1 over 2 simplify? Yes. Oh. We leave it. Leave it as a fraction. Throw it right in as a decimal. Leave it as negative 1 over 2. questions over that. Again, if it helps, write the formula. I wrote x first. But we want to find slope. We know that's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And it might help if you label. X is first, y is second. So it's x1, y1, x2, y2. Plugging our values into that formula. James, what's that top going to look like? Okay. Over what's the bottom going to look like, Logan? X2 minus x1. Good. Clean it up some more. What is negative 3 minus 4? Negative 7. And what's negative 1 minus 3? Does 7 over 4 simplify? But what's a negative over a negative? Positive. So that just changes to 7 over 4. And we are done. Again, just leave it as a fraction. Don't write it as a decimal. Over that. We take a look at 3. It's a little goofy because our x1 and our y1 and our x2 and our y2 are fractions. But that's okay. The process is still the same. Label. It helps. Write down the formula. Y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. We follow that formula here. What's our top going to look like? What is our y2 minus our y1? We don't have this. You don't need to answer. What's it going to look like when we write it down? What do we say our y2 was? 1 over 6. Minus what do we say our y1 was? 1 over 6. Good. What's our bottom going to look like? Andrew, what's our bottom going to look like? So when we clean this up, what's 1/6 minus 1/6? 0. And you might have to use your calculator for this one. What's negative 3 over 4 minus 1/3? That's a fraction. A proper fraction. What do we get? What is that? An improper fraction. You're right. Well. Here, I'll show you how to type it in. If you're rusty on how to type fractions in your calculator, I'll type it in for you. You want to get your calculators out. Okay. Want to get your calculators out? This is how you type a fraction in your calculator if you don't remember from these years. What you're going to do to get your fraction, you're just going to do alpha y equals, enter. There's your fraction bar. And we had, what was it, negative 3/4. So do negative 3 over 4, arrow out, minus, was it 1/3? Minus alpha, y equals, enter, and you get 1/3. And the green button, y equals, and enter will give you a fraction bar. If you have an older graphing calculator, you just use the division symbol. I'll show you here in a second. So we plug that in, we get negative 13 over 12. Okay? How you would type it in if you have an older graphing calculator, you would have just done negative 3 divided by 4. It's a alpha y equals button. Doesn't give you anything, doesn't give you what it gave me. You just use that, and then you would do minus 1 divided by 3. So fractions, it's really important to put parentheses. calculator might not necessarily read it correctly, so put parentheses with fractions. Enter. You get a decimal. If you just do math, enter, it'll change it to a fraction for you. You have an older graphing calculator, the green button y equals, then you give you a fraction button. Okay? Here's the thing, this might seem really overwhelming. If you have like a fraction within a fraction, but just ask yourself, 0 divided by anything is what? 0. So you don't even have to worry about that. You just have 0 in the top. You're like, oh, I know what that is. That's 0. That's my answer. Let me put a line through it so it doesn't look like a circle with a square with a circle in it. 0. Okay. That one seemed overwhelming, wasn't it? Whenever you have 0 in the top of your fractionary answer. Question. Okay. So again, use that formula, y2, I say y and I write an x. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And again, it helps if you label x1, y1, x2, y2. We plug those values in. Bree, what's the top of our fraction going to look like? What did you say? Good. 0 minus 4. What's the bottom of our fraction going to look like? 2 minus 2. 0 minus 4 is what? Negative 4. What's 2 minus 2? I know what this is. This is 0, right? That's my answer. No. Why is it not 0? This is not in the top. Where is it? In the bottom. What did we talk about when we talked about when we have 0 in the bottom? Can we have that?
No.
Oh, we talked about it last unit. Can't divide by 0. So what is our slope? It's undefined. That's how I abbreviate undefined. Can't have 0 in the denominator. It's undefined. So when 0 is in the denominator, your slope is undefined. When 0 is in the numerator or the top, it's 0. Questions over that? So this might be a little different than what you did in Algebra 1, but it's not too bad. It's kind of pros at slope by now. It says find the value of r so that the line through the given point has the specified slope. So on the previous ones, we were given the points, we had to find the slope. And these, we were given the slope and part of the points, we had to find one of the missing values. Okay? So we're going to set it up the same exact way. We just have to set as an equation. x1, y1, x2, y2. And we're still using that slope formula. So we follow this, y2 minus y1. Well, my y2 is r minus my y1, which is 4. Yes.
That's hilarious.
You're in slope right now, too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? Well, I use this in chemistry.
And you are in chemistry, you're going to do slope 2 times today.
No, please no.
Slope's not that bad. And then we to the bottom, we have negative 5 minus 1, x2 minus x1. And then, I'm going to actually write it down here so you have less equal signs. Sorry, wasn't thinking. I'm going to move it down here. We don't have like 5 equal signs in our problem. Oops, hang it. Okay, all that slope formula. And if when we do that, it's going to equal, what's our slope? 1/3. You're just setting it up like a formula. You're still doing y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, but you just have to set it equal to your slope because we know what our slope is. Okay. And when we clean it up, we can't really do anything with the top, so I'm just going to leave it as r minus 4 over, what's negative 5 minus 1? You can clean that up. Negative 6. Okay. And you should have done this in geometry last year. We have a fraction equaling a fraction. What method of solving do we use? Cross what? Multiply across. Cross multiply. Okay. There is another way you can solve this, but you'll see an example too, but just being consistent and using cross multiplication is easier. I'll show you another way you could have solved it that only works when the variable's in the top. But when we cross multiply, I always like to put parentheses around that binomial. Here's the reason why. Okay? I'm multiplying this entire thing, r minus 4, by 3. Not just the r, not just the 4, the entire thing's being multiplied by 3. Okay? And that's equal to, what's negative 6 times 1? I might help it. I'll write it like that so we know we're multiplying the two things together. So then we clean these up. What do we have to do with that 3? Distribute it. 3 times r is 3r. 3 times negative 4. Negative 12. And then here we said negative 6 times 1 is negative 6. That way when you look back, you can see that you multiply. You're not wondering where the number came from. And then you just solve like a two-step equation to get r by itself. What do we have to do with the 12? Okay. So 12. We're subtracting it with us, they're subtracting. Add. Negative 6 plus 12 is 6. Now what do we have to do with the 3? Combine. And 6 divided by 3 is what? So r is equal to 2. And you can even check. We go back in here and we make that a 2. 2 minus 4. Negative 2 over negative 5 minus 1 is negative 6. Negative 2 over 6 simplifies down to 1/3. So you got our slope. So one way of checking your answer is plugging it back in to make sure it works. Make sure you did your math right. Some of you might have been thinking, well, couldn't I have just multiplied by negative 6 on both sides? And then solve for r? Yeah, that's totally fine. That only works when the variable is in the numerator, though. And you could have just multiplied by the number in the bottom, move that 4 over, solve. You could have done that. I'm totally fine. Okay? You can't do that for number 6. You have to use cross multiplying for number 6, so I just wanted to be consistent and just do cross multiplying for both, because it'll get you the right answer from both. Okay? So we're going to set it up the same way. We're using the slope formula. And that's equal to Rm. Okay. So label x1, y1, x2, y2. Fill it in. What's our top going to look like when we plug that in? Tony, what's our top going to look like when we plug it into slope?
It's going to look like negative 4 minus 6.
Yep. Over what's the bottom going to look like, Mars? We do x2 minus x1. R minus negative 2. Very good. And that's going to equal, what's our m? Negative 5. In the bottom here, we have a double negative. What does that turn into? Positive. Good. So you just make that a plus. So whenever you have a double negative with slope, it turns to a positive. And what do we want to write around this binomial? Parentheses. Okay. And then we said we use cross multiplication to solve. Here's the thing, we don't have a fraction. We have a whole number. We'll put it over 1. There you go. Write that over 1. Now we cross multiply. Multiply across. When we do so, before we multiply, I'm sorry. What's negative 4 minus 6? What does that become? That's like saying that's negative 10. Sorry. Should have done that. That's negative 10. So negative 10 times 1 is negative 10. Is equal to, again, we're doing negative 5 times this whole bottom, which became r plus 2. And then what do we have to do with the negative 5? Distribute it. Negative 5 times r. And then negative 5 times 2. 10. And then solve for r. When solving for r, what do we have to do with the negative 10?
Add it.
Okay. Cancels out here. What's negative 10 plus 10? That's okay. Leave it as 0. And then what do we have to do with that negative 5? Divide it. And again, 0 divided by anything is
0.
so that's our r. Again, double check your work. Just make sure you did your math correctly. I'm going to go and plug 0 in for r. So we get negative 10 over 0 minus, or 0 plus 2 is 2. Negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So we're good. That's just a check. You don't have to check. That's just a check. Questions over that? It's a little bit different than what you did from in Algebra 1. Just a concept summary again. One's going upwards from left to right, so it's positive. Downwards from left to right, slope's negative. Horizontal line, slope is 0. Vertical line, slope is undefined. Remember, just like walking on the floor, slope's 0, nice and flat. It's like walking on a wall, which we can't do, so it's undefined. Questions over that?